Hey everybody, this is my thoughts on E3 this year. Oh, was it a weird year for E3, because a lot of people were acting like it was the best year in E3 ever, and it really wasn't. In fact, it was nowhere near the best E3 we've ever had. But ultimately, the biggest problem with E3 is that it's a hype generation device, and not much else. And they cranked that up to 11 this time around because, let's face it, they pulled out all the stops on getting your nostalgia going, and not much else. I want you to think about what actually got shown off at E3 this year. And think about how much of this stuff was actually new. And not just a sequel, a re-release, or a remake. Now, don't get me wrong. There is nothing wrong with a sequel, a remake, or a re-release. That's fine. But that's basically all that got shown at E3 this year. Barely anything new. Especially not from the major people. Not from people like Microsoft, EA, Ubisoft, any of them. What did they show? Maybe one new title. One new, completely original title. And for Ubisoft, that was For Honor, which looks interesting. It looks like a game I might actually like playing. But it was the only new original thing they showed at E3. Every single thing else they did was a sequel. And a lot of it was just stuff we already knew about anyway. Things like Rainbow Six Siege, which we knew was coming out this year anyway. Things like The Division, which has been shown at the past couple of E3s. The Crew got an expansion pack. Whoop-de-doo. They did announce a new Ghost Recon title, which, I mean, it looks interesting. It looks like a very unusual take on it. But, again, that's relying on brand recognition. Ghost Recon. Bethesda's only new original game is Battlecry, and it's not all that interesting, honestly. Everything else they showed was a sequel, or a spin-off. Using brand recognition. Again, Fallout 4. I mean, at this point, it has nothing to do with Fallout. I don't know about you guys, but generally when I think of Fallout, I don't think of an open-world sandbox FPS with extremely minimalistic RPG elements and an emphasis on just being completely ridiculous. No, I think of an actual role-playing game with heart and soul. And yet, when they showed off Fallout 4 and it looks like a game from like 3-4 years ago, and it has horrendous lip sync. Oh, it was terrible. I don't know how they managed to get it that bad. But that's beside the point. The game looks nothing like an actual Fallout game. It looks like a Bethesda game that they just slapped the Fallout logo on and are relying entirely on brand recognition. And that's exactly what they're doing. And you know what? People ate it up. It's going to sell millions of copies, and people are going to gush over it like they do with every single other Bethesda game, even though they haven't actually made a good game at all since Morrowind. But that's beside the point. The rest of the stuff they showed. Doom 4, Dishonored 2. I mean, I'm excited for Dishonored 2, but it'd be nice to see something new and original. Doom 4, I mean, at least it doesn't look as bad as Doom 3 was. Battlecry, I don't care. It just doesn't look all that interesting, honestly. The Elder Scrolls Online. I've never cared about MMOs, and most people these days are just like, well, if it's Elder Scrolls Online, the only reason that anybody would want to play it is because it's got the Elder Scrolls name, and it's just a pretty generic MMO. There's not really much of a reason to actually play it. They were just showing off the console release anyway. And then there's the Elder Scrolls Legends, a card game. Or Fallout Shelter, a mobile game, and people went crazy over it. They're just relying on brand recognition. And when you go to the other conferences, it's much the same. I mean, Nintendo has always done this. They have always relied on brand recognition, but at least the games they've made have been at least decent for the most part. Although the Zelda series has really suffered lately. It's been actually pretty sad. But I just want to see them taking risks, doing things that are different, not relying on old IP. I mean, hell, the big announcement at the Microsoft press conference was backwards compatibility on Xbox One for Xbox 360 games. Which I guess is a godsend, because there's basically nothing worth playing on Xbox One right now. What do they have coming? Halo 5, Gears of War 4, Gears of War Ultimate Edition, which is just a re-release. Dark Souls 3. Forza Motorsport 6. Plants vs. Zombies Garden Warfare 2, which is coming to all systems. But you know what? I will give Microsoft something over Sony. At least Microsoft actually showed off a lot of the newer titles that they're sponsoring through their indie thing, which actually seem original and interesting. Cuphead, for example, even though it is relying on the kind of nostalgia of the 1930s cartoon style, it looks interesting, it looks unusual. It's a new IP. It's like, holy crap, Recore is a new IP. Gasp! Ashen, Tacoma, Beyond Eyes, Phantasmal, City of Darkness, Ion, Sea of Thieves. All new IPs. Holy crap! I mean, a lot of them are indie titles that they're just kind of publishing on their Xbox One, but still, at least it's something new. And that's something you'll notice throughout this. Pretty much all of the new IPs are indie titles that are just being released on the given systems. They're not actually new IPs from the main companies, which is really sad because they have all of this development talent, and you know that there are people in these studios who really desperately want to create something new and interesting, and instead they're being thrown to work on things like Halo 5. At this point, it doesn't really matter whether the games are good or not. We need creativity. We need new IPs. We need to stop relying on old stuff, because that's basically what you're getting with this year's E3. Battlefront 3, Mirror's Edge 2, even though Mirror's Edge 2 looks like it's gonna be better than the original, that's fine. Mass Effect 4, which they dropped the 4 and instead are calling it Mass Effect Andromeda. Another Need for Speed game. I don't know how that's even a thing anymore. Madden, NHL, FIFA, NBA, another PGA Tour game. Only this time, instead of Tiger Woods, it's Rory McIlroy. Oh well. The only truly new thing that EA really showed was a game called Unravel, which is another puzzle platformer, but at least it's a different concept for a puzzle platformer than just insert generic puzzle platformer here. When you got to Sony, basically the only unusual new IP kind of stuff that they showed was indie titles. The rest was all established franchises, or just console releases of PC games, like with Devolver Digital stuff. They're releasing a lot of their PC games on PS4. That's cool, but it's not new and original games. The only new and original stuff they did was The Last Guardian, which, frankly, that's not new anymore. That's been in development for years and years at this point, and it really doesn't look all that different from when they last showed it on PS3, years ago. I don't know what the delay has been, but it seems like the game has not progressed other than a very slight change in visuals. They showed off No Man's Sky again, but we already knew about that. They showed off Firewatch. We already knew about that. Their new IPs this year were something called Dreams, which is just... the only real way I can kind of describe it is basically Gary's Mod, but with kind of claymation going on. It's kind of weird, you just kind of have to look it up for yourself, but that's only on PS4. They also showed a new IP called Horizon Zero Dawn, which, I mean, it looks vaguely interesting at least, but certainly not enough to make me want to get a PS4. Now instead, what they relied on was, of course, The Last Guardian, but also Shenmue 3, which they had a hand in from the beginning, apparently, but the Kickstarter was to judge interest, and people lapped it up like crazy, because that's one of those cult IPs that people are like, oh, we gotta have Shenmue 3. Come on, guys, do Shenmue 3. And then when they finally announced, hey, we're gonna do Shenmue 3, people just like throwing their money at the screen. It's ridiculous. Uncharted 4. Batman Arkham Knight. That's relying on 2 established IPs, which are Batman and the Batman Arkham series. Black Ops 3 is now at the Sony event. It's Call of Duty. More brand recognition. You go to the PC scene, it's not really all that much different, honestly. It's just rehash of the other stuff we saw at the show. An expansion pack for StarCraft 2 and for Heroes of the Storm, both of which we already knew about and, in fact, have already been out for a while. Deus Ex, Rising Storm 2, at least it's set in Vietnam instead of World War II, and it may well be the first actually good Vietnam War game that we'll ever get. Who knows? Killing Floor 2, Killer Instinct getting a PC release, Fable Legends, Gigantic being on PC as well, the Gears of War Ultimate Edition coming to Windows 10, American Truck Simulator, Eve Valkyrie, Guild Wars 2 expansion, Arma 3 expansion, Soma, which was already announced a while ago, DayZ, Take on Mars, which is just a mod for DayZ that is now getting an early access thing. The new stuff they showed was either indie, like Enter the Gungeon, or they didn't even really show much of, like Blue Streak. They haven't shown anything of that. They just talked about it. That's a new game from Cliff Bleszinski. But we don't know what it's like. All we know is that it's published by Nexon, which means it's basically going to suck, because Nexon's going to force their garbage on it. And then there was the other stuff that got E3 trailers, like Shadow Warrior 2, which is technically the third game, or King's Quest, relying on an old IP, Rock Band 4, Mad Max, relying on a movie license. Are you seeing the problem yet? There's not a lot of new, interesting IP, and we're just kind of drowning in sequels and remakes and re-releases. So I don't know what to really look forward to that stands out. It just feels like the next year in gaming is just going to be more of the same. And that's not a good thing. The same has not been that good lately. This is the time when we really needed to branch off and try something new and different. And instead they play it safe with stuff that was established back in the last gen, or even before that. And so what we've been left with is a show that really did not impress me at all. And frankly, the fact that these so-called games journalists were freaking the hell out over things like Shenmue 3 and Final Fantasy VII Remake is downright disgusting. Gaming has basically become a mockery of itself at this point. And people wonder why I'm so cynical and why I'm so pessimistic when it comes to video games. It's because of things like this, where we drown in the same old stuff over and over and over again. Don't get me wrong, going back to old things is not necessarily a bad thing. Look at Wasteland 2. It was incredibly refreshing. Why? Because we hadn't had a party-based RPG in quite a long time. Now, we have that. We have Pillars of Eternity. We have Divinity Original Sin. We have the upcoming Torment Tides of Numenera. And In Exile's working on Bard's Tale 4. These are all established things, but they're fresh and exciting because we haven't had those things in close to a decade now. Regurgitating the same old crap over and over and over again, like these AAAs like to do, is how we end up with things like the Assassin's Creed games being as incredibly boring as they are now. The old adage comes back, same shit, different year. That's pretty much what E3 was this year. Yes, there are a few titles I'm looking forward to that are sequels, remakes, etc. But it's not inspiring confidence in the games industry. It's really inspiring more of a sense that gaming has become creatively bankrupt. That is not a good thing. We need more original content. And honestly, that's what people were looking forward to the most about the current gen of consoles when it was becoming a new thing. The promise of new original games that do something different than the old style. And instead, what we're getting is more of the same old crap that we got on the last gen. Only this time, we're getting it with more DLC shoved in our faces. We're getting it with more pointless plastic garbage thrown at us, like amiibos and that stupid as hell Pip-Boy Pip-Boy thing that they did for Fallout 4, which it's just a phone cover, people. It's just a phone cover. And yet people act like it's amazing. It's an actual Pip-Boy or something like that. No, it's a plastic phone cover. And you download their app, and you can play around like it's a Pip-Boy by using the touch screen on your phone. That's what it is. I had thought that after things like Evolve, we would be past this crap, that we would be just going, enough is enough. But no. People are just lapping it up. And it's just disgusting, honestly, to see that people are treating E3 with such reverence, with such glee, just eating into the hype like it's not even a big deal. Yes, it is a big deal. Overhyping things like what has been done at this year's E3 is how you end up with games like Watch Dogs, where it was hyped to all hell and was a massive disappointment because it was hyped up so much, because people bought into the hype. And what you got instead was just a average at best game. But honestly, it doesn't matter all that much as far as I'm concerned. It looks like next year's just going to be a really mediocre year for games. We're going to get most of the big stuff at the very beginning of the year. Deus Ex Mankind Divided, Doom 4, Dishonored 2, all those are slated for spring 2016. So we're getting all that stuff out at the beginning of the year. What's going to be left? I don't know. Meanwhile, this year we're getting stuff that was announced last year, which, I mean, that's pretty much as we expected, but wasn't really shown to be all that interesting. Hell, I don't know how you managed to make Star Wars Battlefront look boring, but DICE managed to do it. I am legitimately impressed with how boring they managed to make Star Wars Battlefront look. I'll reserve judgment until I actually play the thing, but somehow, some way, in them attempting to generate as much hype as they can to get as much pre-order sales as they can, it honestly looked way more boring than even Battlefield 3 and 4 do. Hell, graphically, it looks like a game that came out in 2008. It looks like Bad Company 1. At least that's what they showed off at E3. Maybe it'll look better when we actually get to release. Maybe it's just the fact that I'm looking at compressed video formats, but still, it did not inspire confidence. And ultimately, that's what matters going forward. They need to reinstill confidence. Stop relying on old IPs. Stop rehashing the same old design trends from the last gen. Try something new. Try something different. Have enough confidence in your developers to come up with something interesting and new and exciting. The games industry is basically stuck in the same rut that the movie industry is stuck in. The difference is that the games industry took about 30 years to do it, whereas the movie industry took nearly 100. I'm hoping that this year is an anomaly in terms of the sheer amount of just sequels, rehashes, remakes, re-releases, that sort of thing being shown off, and the hype generation for them being off the charts. I'm really hoping it's an anomaly, because if this is what I can expect going forward, then we can expect gaming to just collapse in on itself, which is not a good thing. Now, I'm sure a lot of you are really expecting me to just go on and on about the actual games themselves, what I think about them, what I think they could do, that sort of thing, instead of thinking that I would basically rant for nearly 20 minutes about the complete lack of creativity in the games industry right now. But such is life. You don't always get what you're expecting, necessarily. So let's take the opportunity to talk about a few of the games. What am I excited for in the coming year? Dishonored 2, obviously. Deus Ex Mankind Divided, obviously. Rising Storm 2, obviously. Killing Floor 2, which may come as a bit of a surprise, but I actually really like the original Killing Floor. And it's already out on early access, so I can pick it up when I get the cash for it. But it looks entertaining. It looks stupid, but it looks entertaining. Pillars of Eternity: The White March. Well, I need to play through Pillars of Eternity first, so there's that. I'm still excited for No Man's Sky, but you would have already known that from last year. So there's that. Shadow Warrior 2 looks interesting. It's more of the Shadow Warrior reboot, but ramped up. It looks entertaining. I'm ambivalent towards the new King's Quest. I'm going to reserve judgment until I actually play it, but I don't really know what to think of it right now. It doesn't really look like King's Quest. It looks like it's inspired by King's Quest, but it's not actually King's Quest. We'll have to see. There is a new game called Skyshine's Bedlam that looks interesting. It's based on the Banner Saga engine. They didn't really show it off at any of the conferences, but there was an E3 trailer for it. It's a post-apocalyptic tactical RPG kind of thing. It looks interesting. It looks entertaining. I'm looking forward to getting my hands on it when I can. But that kind of it, really. There's not really much else that was shown at E3 that I'm legitimately interested in. There was one thing that you guys might find rather amusing, and that the only reaction I could actually have to it was what I'm linking in an annotation right now. So click on the annotation that's popping up right now, and you will see my reaction to World of Final Fantasy. That one was painful, to say the least. So, yeah, check out the link in that annotation. You will understand immediately what I thought. And you might even get a chuckle out of it. But honestly, it's also kind of hard to get excited for titles that you can't play because you don't have the system. For example, 3DS games. I don't have a 3DS. Wii U games. I don't have a Wii U either. So I can't play those games. So it's hard to get excited for things like The Legend of Zelda Triforce Heroes, even though it looked painfully awful, actually. If only for reminding me that Final Fantasy X-2 exists by basically ripping off its dress sphere system, where you dress Link up in different clothes and suddenly he has different abilities. Really? But the other games that Nintendo showed, again, more of the same. It's not really all that interesting, honestly. I am interested in the new Fire Emblem, but Fire Emblem Fates, of course. But I still haven't played the one on 3DS because I don't have a 3DS. So I can't get Fire Emblem Fates either. That's the problem with a lot of those games from Nintendo. Some of those are actually things that I might actually be interested in playing, but I just can't. Whereas on the other conferences, a lot of the stuff I'm just not interested in. And honestly, it's kind of hard to say anything about them if you're not interested in them, even in the slightest. So ultimately, all that leads to E3 this year being a resounding meh. It's more of the same kind of stuff with only a handful of titles that actually look interesting. And most of those are just sequels, remakes, reboots, whatever. So we'll just have to wait and see on things. There are some things that they haven't shown off at E3, but they might show off at Gamescom or PAX. And so we might just have to wait for Gamescom and PAX to really actually see anything interesting. But E3 was just a big letdown this year. So if you guys have any more specific questions or comments or whatever, feel free to ask or comment or whatever. But please stop asking me about Fallout 4. I'm just tired of hearing it. Just, what do you think about Fallout 4? What do you think? What do you think could be done to save it? Please stop asking me about Fallout 4. I am just sick of hearing it constantly. You guys should know by now that I have no interest in it whatsoever. Quite literally, the only way you would be able to get me interested in Fallout again is if they announced that Obsidian Entertainment, with all of the people who worked on Fallout 2, is working on a new Fallout game that is nothing like what Bethesda's doing. That's basically the only way you can get me interested in Fallout anymore. And as it stands with what Bethesda's doing, I don't care what Bethesda Game Studios makes at all. I don't care about Elder Scrolls, I don't care about Fallout. Because they have proven to me that either they're completely incompetent or they just do not care and all they want to do is make a cynical cash grab. Though I do have to wonder, because they did announce that the release date for Fallout 4 is on my birthday this year. So it's almost like that's an insult directed straight at me. But you know what? There's plenty other games that are not Fallout 4. So there is that. And frankly, a lot of those other games are way better than anything Bethesda has ever made. There's plenty of other things to look forward to in the coming months and year. So we'll have to wait and see. Hopefully they don't have Windows 10 exclusivity on things like Deus Ex Mankind Divided, because I really want to play Mankind Divided, and I really don't want to have to upgrade to Windows 10 this early. Because there are a lot of games that I have that don't even work all that well on 32-bit Windows 7, let alone 64-bit, and they probably wouldn't even work at all on Windows 10, because I know that there's a lot of stuff that even is made for Windows 7 that doesn't work on Windows 8. So we'll have to just wait and see on that, I guess. I'm seeing that a lot, but that's pretty much all you can say with E3. It's wait and see. Wait until games come. Wait until PAX. That's when they'll actually show the playable versions and such. And wait until the betas of stuff comes around. I am registered for the Rainbow Six Siege and For Honor betas, so hopefully I'll get into those, and hopefully they will not have an NDA on that, so I can actually make videos about it. Because those games look interesting and entertaining, and I'm certainly looking forward to getting my hands on Rainbow Six Siege as soon as possible. So there are titles I'm looking forward to. It's not all doom and gloom, although I've probably made it out to be like that. But I'm just not all that excited. I don't really buy into hype. I might get a bit hyped up for something because it's just something I'm interested in. It might be something like Deus Ex, which I really liked Human Revolution, so I'm looking forward to Mankind Divided, provided that it does more of that kind of quality, where it actually feels like a proper Deus Ex game, instead of just something stupid like Deus Ex The Fall. I tend to reserve judgment until I actually play the thing. You may not think that when you go into some of my reviews. For example, the Skyrim review, you may think I went into that wanting to hate it. I didn't. I always reserve judgment until I actually play the games. And that's the case with all of this stuff. Ultimately, it's nice that we've got announcements for new things. It's nice that we know this stuff is on the horizon. But what really matters is when we get our hands on it. So, I will catch you guys in later videos.